Many thanks to my fine tool partners and new and old patrons. You guys are awesome. Couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much.
Cleaning the HVLP spray gun after you're done spraying. That's on this episode. So if you guys joined me last week, you saw that I sprayed those barn doors right over there using my HVLP spray gun. And I sprayed 2 different kinds of stain. Now it's time to break it all down and clean it up because she is a mite dirty. But I've had some questions on how I clean my HVLP gun, so let me break it down literally on how that works. If this is your first time here, I want to welcome you. Please be sure and click that subscription button that you see down below. Don't forget to click that notification bell and it'll tell you anytime I post new content. I try and post new stuff each and every single week, from build videos to SketchUp tutorials, so there's something for everybody. So what I'm gonna do, instead of taking apart my gun that's covered in stain, I'm gonna show you guys the gun after I've already cleaned it. I'm going to show you how I disassemble it and the method that I use for cleaning, and then we're going to reassemble it so you guys can see how it goes back together and the proper steps to take to make sure that it's done correctly. I've got my phone here on a tripod that I'm going to use for a close-up view, like a downward overview, so that way you guys don't miss a thing. Before you start cleaning your gun, get everything together that you're going to need so it's efficient as possible, and that way you're not having to walk around with dirty hands or gloves trying to find all the parts that you need to get this thing in pieces to start cleaning it. So here's what you're going to need. I've got a 1 gallon bucket of mineral spirits right here that I always keep in the shop, and sometimes you have to clean this out because it does get gunked up a little bit, but always have it handy, and it's a 1 gallon bucket. I've got a measuring cup right here that I use for small parts, and then some needle nose pliers. I've also got an ice pick, which is the Duresta ice pick, but you don't have to have something that fancy. The multi-tool that comes with the gun itself, so it fits multitude of different size nuts, bolts, and it even has a paint can pry bar right there. And then I've also got this plastic dish pan that I use for post-drying parts, and I can set them in there and they can finish drying. So after your gun is not used anymore and you're ready to clean it off, these are the steps that you need to take to ensure that it comes apart easily and you don't screw anything up. So first, you need to release the pressure on your can. So by doing that, you can either have a towel or something wrapped around the seal and then pop this loose. You'll probably hear some air escape out of the can. There might be some spatter here and there, which is why the towel covers that up. I don't recommend that you pull the hoses off because it will spurt out. So just release the pressure from this part right here, the latch. Then you can put it back, and that way it all stays as one piece because you are going to have a lot of stain in here. Then you can start taking your hose apart at the anti-drip valve right here. So this valve right here is super important. If it gets stuck open or stuck closed, the gun won't work properly. If it's stuck open, material coming up this hose from having the gun tilted every which way is going to continue running into this hose and then outside of the gun and make a total mess. So another thing that you should do is clean this very thoroughly. If it's stuck shut, you won't be able to get pressure into the can, and the siphon action will not occur, and you won't get any material coming out of the gun. So either replace this every so often or clean it as best you can. Like I said, I usually keep mineral spirits or whatever solvent that cleans the gun inside this particular measuring cup, and I just drop small parts in it. So that's one that I would drop off. Now you can choose to take these 2 hoses off. You don't necessarily have to, but you can. I'm first going to take off this ring, which keeps the air cap on, and these holes right here are super important to clean. So we'll drop that into the small parts as well. Now there is some pressure being applied to the tip right here at the needle cap right there by this knob right here, which is spring loaded underneath. So you need to take that out first to release pressure on the needle. If you try and take the needle cap off first, you're going to possibly damage the needle because of all the pressure that is being applied by the spring. So take off this screw first. Now depending on how messy you got, you may or may not have to clean these. Sometimes I usually don't have to clean them. So you can set them aside in your parts container there after cleaning. Now that that's out, you can slide the needle out just like that, and it's going to be covered in material, so you can drop it into your small parts container. Then you can go ahead and take off your needle cap. So that hole right there on this multi-tool can take it off. Just unscrew it. Put it in your small parts container. Take this part off. Now there's going to be 2 plastic rings. Well, you saw one of them just fall out right there. There's going to be another one right here. And then drop all of that into your small parts. And there's one more piece right here that comes out. Drop into your small parts. Now the function of the fan, you don't necessarily have to take apart. I haven't taken mine apart yet. There is a screw right here that you can take all of that out if you like, but it doesn't give me a problem if I don't. I just make sure that it gets clean with brushes. And I'll show you the brushes here in just a little bit. So the backside here where the hose actually feeds air into the tank needs to come out. You can take this hose off of this barb if you want. Otherwise, just leave it on and you can clean it all as one part. So take the appropriate size wrench and unscrew it. There we go. It comes out as one part like that. Like I said, take the hose off if you like. Drop it into your small parts. Now, the needle inlet, do the same thing. Pop it loose and unscrew it. Now be very careful as this will come out with a spring. Right there. Drop that in your small parts. Take the spring out. Drop that. Now, this little part right here, this is a very important part. This piece actually determines whether or not your gun is a bleeder or a non-bleeder gun. This little washer causes a seal up inside this hole right here as it's put in, and the trigger operates it and allows air to pass through when need be, okay? If this washer was smaller, it would allow air to pass through the nozzle at all times, making this a bleeder gun. However, this one creates a seal not allowing air to pass through, which makes this a non-bleeder gun. So no air passes through the tip unless the trigger is depressed. So this is a very important part to make sure that it is clean all the time because it does move inside the gun. So drop that into your small parts. Now, basically, the top portion of the gun is taken apart as far as it needs to go. You do need to separate the, forgive the train, you do need to separate the upper part of the gun from the lower half. And you do that just by loosening that nut. Now if you have a gravity fed gun, you'll find that on top. But this is a siphon fed gun, so that's how it comes apart. Now this part, you can put in your 1 gallon mineral spirits or solvent container that you have. Just drop it in all in as one piece and let it soak there for just a little bit so you can thoroughly clean it later. Now take your gun apart, or take your canister apart. This will be covered in stain or paint or whatever it is that you've got going on in here. So you're gonna have, this is where the mess comes in. Take whatever you have left over and dump it back into your material that you are using. And then you can take some mineral spirits out of your canister and put it inside here and let that soak, or whatever solvent it is that you need, and just kind of put it aside. When you take these apart, make sure you have some kind of a drop cloth because it is going to get messy. The next part you need to remove is the filter. Drop that in your small parts. Now, the pressure cap right here has a little bit of a nub. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it does stick up right there. That is what your needle nose pliers can grab. And just kind of pull it up. And it will release from the seal right here. And you can slide it off in one piece. Now, this one is a little big for my small parts container, so I either drop it inside my canister here with the mineral spirits, or I drop it inside my big canister. But I'll just put it over there for now. The ice pick, this is where it comes into play. There's a little seal right here. Whether it is paper or cardboard or something of that nature, it's some kind of material like that, but it keeps the seal against this plastic pressure cap, so it needs to be removed. Now, you can do this one of two ways, one of which I don't recommend. The first way, you can put your needle nose, or excuse me, your ice pick on the outside and pry up. The only problem is that might affect how it seals towards the outside of the canister. So I typically do it on the inside. So I just find a good little spot to go, and I put it right there on the inside and just barely stick the ice pick into it. I try not to damage it as little as I can. And then it pulls out. Now, these pieces, as well as the filter, may occasionally need to be replaced because of wear and tear and compression. This little filter right here compresses all the time, and it eventually might need to be replaced. So keep an eye on these parts and make sure that they are in still good working condition. If you start noticing seal problems and you start leaking, this may be an issue. Now, this is taken apart as much as it possibly can. You don't really need to take it apart any more than this. You can, but it's not necessarily recommended, at least in my opinion. So just drop this into your big parts container right here and let it soak. Now, you can remove the hose from this barb if you like. It's not necessary in my humble opinion, but you can take it off. There's really nothing else that you need to remove, so just drop that into your big parts container and let it soak. Now, Fuji does make some brushes that you can use. There's a kit that they put together that allow you to clean this gun very thoroughly, even some small brushes that you see here. There is a little pick that can help you with removing the seal if you want to use it instead. Even some that are really, really small that have just a really fine type of cleaning edge on it. Really won't hurt your gun, but it does really help to clean if the little nylon bristles can't get in there. Now, eventually these will break down and you'll probably have to buy some new ones, but it does take a long time. I've used these for about a year now and they're still holding up very, very well. So look into that for cleaning your gun adequately. Now, you might get some cleaning stuff that come with your gun. I can't quite remember exactly what came with mine. But yeah, look into their cleaning kit. Also, if you are wondering, Fuji does make an air cap and needle kit that has many different sizes. Now, my 1.3 is missing because it is over here in the cup, but it comes with a 1.0, a 1.3, a 1.5, and a 1.8. They come with all of the caps as well as the needles, and then the air cap right there as well. So they are fully equipped with whatever you need to change out different sizes for different applications. They also have on their website, and I've downloaded this, it's a quick reference sheet that you can figure out what size needle is good for what type of medium that you are spraying. And I typically use a 1.8 most of the time with all of my Pre Cat Lacquers, and 1.3 is used for just about anything else that you want to spray. Really thick paints, I'll typically use a 1.8. My stain, I'll spray in a 1.0. So you might want to download this and it will give you some tips on what to use for proper methods of spraying. So when you clean this gun, you want to make sure that you run brushes like these through all of the holes necessary. just to make sure that everything is nice and clean. Your fan will open up. You can actually look inside the top right in here and see that it does open and shut. Just open it up and run your brush through there and make sure that it is all nice and clean. Do it on both sides. You can also take little brushes like these to clean the outside around all of the parts to make sure that there's no debris left inside, any nooks and crannies. And then once you have all of that done, just dry them off thoroughly and let them sit aside in pieces inside your canister right here. So let's just pretend I've cleaned all these. Okay. And just let those sit in that parts container and let them dry for, I would probably say overnight, and then come back and put your gun together the next day. That will ensure that anything that's kind of like lacquer thinner will sometimes be really sticky. And if you put your gun together too soon, you might have some parts that will feel kind of tacky and won't operate properly. So just let them dry. Now with everything clean and sitting overnight for complete drying time, you can put the gun back together. So let me walk you through that real quick. It's just the exact opposite of how we pulled it apart. So we've got the parts here. You can take them all out, make sure that you didn't leave anything in your containers by accident. I have done that. But just kind of take stock of all the parts that you have and make sure that you are not missing anything. So I usually begin with the lower half. I'll put the seal on first, then the pressure cap. Now you'll notice on the pressure cap, right behind that little nub that you grabbed with your needle nose pliers is a hole. This allows for the air to pass through, but you'll also have fluid go through that as well. I mean, it's inevitable. But there is also a hole, if you can see it right there, that comes through the hose. So just kind of line that hole and the hole that's in the pressure cap up together. It's not necessarily, but it just kind of gives you something to line up. And then just make sure that the plastic cap is pressed inside there and it doesn't overhang the metal part of the lower half of the gun, okay? Then find you the strainer filter and push it all the way in place. And that pretty much finishes out the lower half of the gun. Now the upper half, I usually start on the back side and I will grab the bleeder valve or non-bleeder valve and stick it in that lower hole and make sure that it's properly seated. Then grab the big spring and slide it over the shaft. Oh, and by the way, the valve, the long end goes inside the gun first while the short end sticks out the back. Didn't mention that. Stick the spring over the shorter half and take its cap. Now there is a little plastic ring right inside here and that spring kind of barely fits inside it. So kind of seat it on that spring and then kind of compress the spring a little bit and thread carefully that cap into place. And once it stops, just take you the wrench and tighten it just a little bit. Now, I don't recommend putting in the needle just yet because if you tighten the needle up when you go to assemble the tip and all of the other parts, there's going to be pressure behind that tip when you go to tighten it down because you've already put this together. So hang on putting in the needle. So the other hole has the air inlet. Just thread it very carefully. Now the nut will slide around the housing that holds the hose, the barb. Just tighten it up. Right there. Take the wrench again and make sure it's snug. Okay, now flip it over and we're going to work on the tip end. Now, the cap that has the slot as well as that one hole at the top. That hole is an alignment hole. There is a hole at the very top of this piece right here as well. Those two line up together. So you just slide it over and make sure that that hole right there is lined up with the hole that's in the gun. Take the small ring and set it inside that part. Make sure it's seated good. Then you can take this plastic ring and set over that. And then the cap for the air passageway cap that has all the holes in it, you can take that. There is a stud right here on the back side that lines up with the two holes in the gun and that part, and it seats. Also, you need to make sure that that plastic ring that you stuck on the gun is seated properly on that piece now. That is very important. Then you can take the needle tip, stick it in the hole and tighten it down. Make sure it's not cross-threaded. Take your wrench and tighten that up. Now flip the gun back over. Then you can insert your needle in that lower hole. Pass it all the way through the trigger. It goes all the way through the trigger here and into the gun, and it stops right here at the tip. Okay? Take the small spring and slide it over the needle on the back side. And it does stick out quite a bit. You can kind of see it right there. Okay. Then take your screw head and slide it over the spring. You'll have to compress the spring slightly and find the threads. This is very important. This little piece right here is aluminum, so it can strip pretty easily if you're not careful, so just make sure that you don't cross thread it. And I tighten it all the way down. Flip the gun back over to the tip, then take the air cap, whatever you're using, and slide it on. Then take the ring to secure it all down. Okay. Now you can take your canister, take the lower half of the gun that's assembled already, and attach it. There you go. Now attach that set of threads right there to the nut that's on the lower half. Okay. And make sure that it's nice and tight. Then take the anti-drip valve, and I look at this as an arrow. So you can kind of see there's a small little taper on one side of the valve that actually points towards the canister. The flat side points towards the air inlet or outlet valve, I guess you could say. So put the flat side against that short hose, and the long hose that goes to the canister gets pointed at by the taper of the anti-drip valve. Now, if there's any kind of debris that's inside this valve, it can cause problems with how this gun functions, like I said before. Make sure that it's not stuck open or stuck shut. Lacquer thinner can sometimes do that. You might have to replace this particular valve more often than you will those seals. One last thing you should do after dipping a gun like this that has moving parts in any kind of liquid, whether it be water, lacquer thinner, or mineral spirits, you will need to lubricate any moving parts. So like the needle that goes inside back and forth, or that bleeder valve, the location of the trigger where it hinges at, anything that has a moving part. You want to just lubricate and use a dry lubricant that will help. And that about wraps up how to take this gun apart and clean it very thoroughly and put it all back together after you've let it set and dry for a day. I hope that information was good enough for you guys to learn how to take care of your Fuji Q4 or HVLP sprayer gun that looks a lot like this one. And if you have any questions, you can drop them down below in the comments, along with any suggestions or tips that you might have. I am still learning processes on finishing as well as care and maintenance for my tools, and if you guys have ran into any situations that you think I could benefit from that you have learned the hard way, I would love to hear them. So guys, thanks very much. If you want to check out any of my prior videos, they're right over there. Click that subscription face that you see in the center, and I will talk at you later. Boom!